Aye. Tell them. Aye. Again. Look. Welcome to the youth, it's the voice of us. It's about to go down, have trust in us.
Come and see the positive realities. Welcome to the show. It's time that we gotta speak up.
Good vibes, no hate, we all like a family. We're heading for the top, so don't get mad
Come and
at
see
me.
the positive realities. Welcome to the show. It's time that we gotta speak up.
Welcome to our very first episode of Among Them, a PYF podcast series. I am Rad and I am joined by the digital ambassadors. This series is run by young people for young people, and we'll be hosting discussions with a series of guests from varying professional backgrounds to explore the different experiences they've had to get to where they are today. Today we are joined by Zarah Sultana, the MP of Coventry South. To start things off, we will have a quick game of word trigger, where all of us have a word or a couple words, and the first thing that comes to mind you say. The goal of the overall game is to say it as fast as possible.
Okay, so you're just going to say a word, and whatever I naturally say first, that's the game, right? Okay.
Yeah, basically.
Okay, I'm really scared. I hope I don't say anything problematic.
Well, okay, maybe give it a second extra, just to be safe.
So we'll start with family.
Love.
Islam.
Faith.
Kirstama.
Leader.
Taxing the 1%.
Essential.
Labour.
Home.
Responsibility.
Important.
Boris.
A joke.
Politics.
Misunderstood.
Young people.
Passion.
Matt Hancock.
Should be unemployed. That's like 3 words. Is that allowed?
Yeah.
I could say that for the entire government, but unemployed.
So now we move on to the question portion of the podcast.
What does it mean to be the MP for Coventry South?
It is a huge privilege. Every day is so meaningful. The work that you can do as an MP and the impact that you can have, you can't really describe it. We see that actually when we're chasing up these departments to help constituents, we can get success. So for me, the job is incredibly rewarding. Of course, there's massive stress involved as well. But I really get pleasure from helping local people. And then in Parliament, I feel like I'm able to give a voice to causes that might otherwise not be heard. Often, I'll be speaking up about refugees and migrants, talking about issues like Black Lives Matter and why it's so important, talking about student loans and debt. And not a lot of MPs have gone through those struggles and might not speak on those. So I think it's really important to amplify issues that others might not, but also principally the things that I believe in.
Do you think it's a struggle to make change?
Absolutely. When we look at history and we look at, the creation of the NHS, or we look at the fact that we have holiday pay and sick pay and maternity and paternity leave, even the concept of the weekend, all of these things we might think they've always been there, or we might not think about how they came into existence. They were the wins of working class people fighting in our workplaces, in our communities, and demanding those things. And often people died for us to have those things. So, all of the things that we are so proud of. And I think that's really important, to be inspired by the things that have happened in the past and know that change can happen, and to not despair when things are tough.
Are there any specific choices that have had an impact on how you represent Coventry today?
I come from an inner city community, rich in diversity, people from all backgrounds, languages, and it really enriched my experience growing up and the schools that I went to. And I saw how underinvestment can take place over a number of years when your community centres close down, when your school starts to struggle with funding. Despite being told, education is an equalizer and you can be anything you want to be if you just work hard, there were people in positions of authority who saw kids like me in a certain way, as criminals and as people that won't achieve much. And that really made me angry. Then when I look at things like the tripling of tuition fees, which I felt was an attack on young people, I felt what worsened it for me was that at that time we couldn't vote, we didn't have a sense of power, and there were demonstrations that took place in London and still nothing changed. So then when I went to university, I got involved with things around free education. I got involved with the student union societies around Kashmir, around Palestine, the Black and Ethnic Minority Association. And that opened a whole new world for me, which was the National Union of Students. And it was really empowering because I didn't get that from my degree course. I didn't feel empowered by the curriculum that I was studying. But in this space where there's young people organizing for a better world, it really made me want to do something and believe that I could do something. And then when Jeremy Corbyn became leader of the Labour Party, I looked at the Labour Party slightly differently. And then Young Labour and spaces like that opened up, and a whole load of us decided to get involved with Young Labour. And I stood in 2019 in May for the European elections, actually. I didn't think I would become a member of the European Parliament. The announcement came for the general election, and I was encouraged to put myself forward, and I did. And I guess in that context, the rest is history. But in terms of the choices that I made, I always try to channel what I was feeling about injustice and inequality through campaigns and activism and politics. And in life, people will channel what they're feeling in different ways through art, through music, through culture, through writing. And I guess the avenue for me was activism and politics.
Do you personally feel as though a financial hierarchy is a significant influence on day-to-day functioning for people?
Absolutely. The way this country is run and whose interest it is running, you can see there is a hierarchy, like you've described. When you have that breakdown of inequalities and who they hit disproportionately, it's people from ethnic minority communities, it's women, it's disabled people. And when you look at whose wealth has increased, and this is pre-pandemic, when we look at from 2010 to 2020, the wealth of the richest people in this country has increased. In fact, their taxes were cut. Instead, we've seen the NHS really struggle. We've seen community centres close. We've seen people lose jobs and so forth. And in the pandemic, in the context of the pandemic, again, it's working class people who have been hit the hardest. And again, the wealth of the wealthiest 1,000 people in this country has grown exponentially, even globally, when you look at the scale of the richest people in the world, the billionaires whose wealth has grown massively. That's what I'm trying to change in Parliament when I'm talking about the contracts the Conservative Party is giving to people who happen to be their friends and their family members and their donors.
Do you plan on going forward for MP again when your 5 years are up, and what does your future in politics look like?
I did 4 years in retail, I did 2 years in Primark, I did 2 years in H&M, and I think that's where I got some of my thick skin from. And then after graduating, I actually had a period of being unemployed, and then I found work in the third sector within charities, and then as a community organizer. And I've always been someone who will look at opportunities and go for it. And being in this position right now, I see it as an incredible privilege, and I don't know how long it will last. That is the nature of politics. I'm here for as long as I'm meant to be here, for as long as it's written for me to be here. And I will do everything that I can in that time to serve the people of Coventry South to promote the interests of working class people and young people. And hopefully when the next general election is called, I will be the Labour Party candidate for Coventry South again. And I will hopefully, with a very strong campaign like last time, hopefully get re-elected and do the same all over again.
Talking about how Coventry Market has not been given enough financial support. So in your opinion, what should the government and politicians be doing to support the people of Coventry?
So it was a real shame that they felt the government had basically left them behind and not made financial provisions for them. So we've been working with the traders and campaigning for there to be funding available for them to be able to sustain themselves and for there to be a Coventry Market when some of the worst effects of the pandemic are over. And thankfully, the council have a pot of funding that the traders have been able to access. So we're working with them to make sure that they are supported to the best of their ability.
So during the pandemic, we've been affected both physically and mentally. Even worse, there have been a lot of casualties. What's your input on how the government has dealt with the pandemic?
I think the government's record on the pandemic is horrific. Over 120,000 people dead, the worst economic performance of any major OECD economy, the highest death rate of any large country in the world. I think those are things that every government minister and every Conservative MP should think about every single day, every waking minute, because it didn't have to be this way. Right from the very start, this government has been slow to implement lockdowns when it was required. It has then been incredibly eager and quick to lift those restrictions when cases weren't low enough. It has been slow to put in the infrastructure we have needed, like test and trace and PPE. And when I look at, for example, what New Zealand did, what Vietnam did, what Taiwan did, what South Korea did, and we just look at the fact that we've only really started quarantining people and having airport checks over the last few months. Schools are still going through a chaotic experience because a year later we still haven't really given them enough support and guidance, and young people are stressed out with anxiety and all sorts of mental health issues. I think it's been an absolute shambles, and I keep on trying to hold the government to account and asking them to do better, because it gives me no joy. With the second lockdown, there was this desire to just open up businesses, have eat out to help out. I mean, eat out to help out. I could write a dissertation on why that was catastrophic and how some of the science suggests that it really did result in more people being hospitalized and cases increasing. But no one really wants to talk to Rishi Sunak about that and holding him to account. So there are multiple decisions the government made that prioritized profit over public health. It was more about the economy rather than people.
Given that people love to hate politics, why did you choose this career?
Thug life, you don't choose it, it chooses you, right? I mean, to a degree, I did choose it, and because I ran in the election. But I can tell you, I knew that there was a degree of hate you get because you're in the public eye, but I was not prepared for the scale of it. Getting stuff in the post which will say, go back to your country of origin, and will call me a foreigner and will say, I hope you have a slow and painful death. And it's just like, wait, what am I saying that is making you so horrible and, wishing such horrible things? And usually it's related to speaking up for migrants and refugees. That's when I see the usual abuse really, really scale up. And people will say, oh, you got into politics, you're a young woman, like, what did you expect? And I don't think anyone should expect getting abused in their job. And I don't think, speaking up for working class communities, speaking up for young people, speaking up for the most vulnerable in our society, refugees, migrants, homeless people in prison, who don't have, a voice, they're disenfranchised. Why does that mean that you should get abuse, whether it's social media or anywhere else? So I'm really glad that I have a really good network of friends and family. It's really important that we show solidarity with people who do get abused. Diane Abbott, first Black woman MP, gets the most abuse of any MPs. And she shows incredible, resilience. And I don't think she should, but she does. And that gives me confidence because I look to her and I'm inspired. So I'm hoping that to younger people, to women, people of color and so forth, I want them to look and say, actually, I feel like maybe I could become an MP, and I feel like standing up in the chamber and telling Boris Johnson that he is, a waste man in many ways. I can do that.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that will inspire people.
That came from left field. I was not expecting that.
To follow up, why choose politics as a platform for change when there are so many other hands-on methods?
There are so many other methods, and like I mentioned, music, academia, some people choose writing. Because of student activism and student politics and being involved with the Labour Party, it just kind of naturally happened that way. For me, politics was something that I felt growing up was always happening to me. I want people to look at what is happening around them and saying, actually, we can change things. We can do it through trade unions. We could do it through political parties. We could do it through so many different means. Of course, one person alone can't do it. It takes movements, it takes coalition building. And I want to be able to support that work that's happening in our communities.
With the lockdown, it has like significantly affected people trying to study. And so they've changed GCSEs and now it's changed into teacher assessed grades. With that, do you think the future of the way they will mark exams, will that be changed from now on, or will it revert back to previous GCSEs and A levels?
It's a really good question, and I don't know the answer to that. And I think even if you posed it to Gavin Williamson, he'd give you some waffle and you wouldn't know you're going to be any wiser by the end of it as well. I think this year has been obviously very, very difficult, and it is an exceptional year based on the pandemic. And we are already one of the most over-tested, over-examined societies in the world. And this year could have been an opportunity to say, actually, let's really look at the way we run our education system and try to do it a bit differently and support young people and say, right, we're not going to do it the way we've done it in the past. And that's not what's happened. We've had the situation with the rigged algorithm, and now we've got teacher assessment. And of course, the best situation would have been having normal exams in normal exam settings, spaced out, ventilation. And unfortunately, we're in a situation where there will be a lot of pressure on teachers, a lot of pressure on schools, and no one really knows what the guidance from exam boards looks like. And exam boards make a lot of money out of the exams, and they will also have to be held accountable to the way they run the exams this summer. I'm really keen to listen to young people about their concerns, and I did just before this call. I met up with a group of students in year 11 from schools in Coventry who are really concerned about the way these exams will be, and what they will mean, and how the appeals process will be, and so forth.
You have significant influence on like the younger generation, especially in Coventry, on how they. Yeah, you do. Look, honestly, for the people that I know, they honestly do know you and they support the things that you do, especially helping our community in things such as student loans or issues that we, different races, not the superior race or whatever it is, that we encounter day to day. And with that, what do you think of yourself? Where do you think yourself going in the next couple of years?
Again, that is very difficult for me to imagine, because I could never have predicted this year being the way it is. I hope that if there's one thing I'm able to achieve, it's showing that you don't have to go to a certain school. You don't have to have a certain accent. You don't need to be from a certain area of the country to be involved in politics.
Carrying on with climate change, but England seems to be pretty far behind on trying to treat our earth better. Why do you think that is?
I think those changes people make to their daily lives, where they have a bag for life or they don't use plastic straws, I think those are good, but I don't think that's what we should be focusing on, because that reduces the issue that we're facing to individual responsibility, when the crux of the issue is the fact that there are 100 companies that are responsible for 71% of global emissions. And we need to be investing in huge infrastructure that's green. We need to think about things like free public transport so people move away from driving. We need to be really thinking about the way our homes are built and how they're insulated. How much green space do we have in our communities? Do we have enough safe bicycle lanes for people to do that? There's so many things that we need to think about. And I think big polluters and companies that are responsible for global emissions really win when we're just focusing on plastic straws and paper bags, because I think that's not where the fight really is.
Do you think big corporations should have regulations or rules set to limit their influences on English society?
One of the things that literally surprised me was how subtle lobbying is done in this country. And when I received gifts in the post that were from Google and Heathrow, I was like, you've got to be kidding me. You really think a packet of shortbread biscuits will make me stop talking about climate catastrophe? And so I posted it on social media, and I talked about it in Parliament as well, how this can't be seen in isolation. You have to see it in the context of these really big companies who host events in Parliament. There's a corridor where Google and other companies will host events where they have fine wine and food for MPs, and especially when you have the Conservative Party that is actually funded by 1/3 of UK billionaires. And I see it reflected in policy. I don't see it as, oh, rich people just giving money, because rich people don't just give money. Because if they did just give money, they would pay their taxes, and they don't. We should be serving the people who elected us and our constituents, and we shouldn't be serving big business. That's not how a democratic society is run.
This year is City of Culture, Coventry City of Culture. What are the plans to help push this festival forward?
So we know City of Culture has been delayed because of the pandemic, but they've started to release their program. And I think a lot of the activities will be done potentially outside in the public to allow social distancing. I think it's a really exciting opportunity to see so many amazing things from local people in Coventry. And I hope that, you know, we get the support that we need after a year of so much hardship. I think it will be just what we need in Coventry.
What, in one sentence summarized, would you tell the youth?
Don't give up and don't lose hope. I think things are incredibly difficult, and people might be thinking that things can't get better and things won't improve. And I think when that happens, that's actually when things are quite scary and dangerous. We always have to believe that things will improve, that we can win, because if we don't and we lose that hope and that vision, that's when those who benefit from the status quo win, because there's no challenge to the way society is run. So we always have to believe that things can get better, that we can collectively win. It's really important that we harness that people channel that in different ways, in political ways, and that's the only way that we'll get the change that we want to see. But is there anything else that you think I could be doing?
I mean, all I can say is just give it time. I mean, you are currently like really influencing the people that I personally know. And what you're doing so far is everything that I have always agreed with, people I know have always agreed with, and hopefully want in the future.
Well, thanks guys. Take care and hopefully see you guys soon.
Bye.
Welcome
to the youth, it's the voice of us. It's about to go down, have trust in us.
Come and see the positive realities. Welcome to the show. It's time that we gotta speak up.
Good vibes, no hate, we all like a family. We're heading for the top, so don't get
Come
mad
and
at
see
me.
the positive realities. Welcome to the show. It's time that we gotta speak up.
What?